I am Karen McRae, I'm in Dorney, and I'm working with Lochalsh Community Response, which is run through the Kyle and Lochalsh Community Trust. And I'm just doing a short-term project to host some of these events and also do the newsletter for anyone that's in the local area.
So hello everyone, nice that you could all be here. My name is Verity and I grew up in Glenelg and have been crafting Glenelg for the last 5 years. Me and my partner started a wee restaurant here in Glenelg called Eolach, and we do private private catering and also communal dining space, where we try our very best to highlight the amazing produce that's in the area, from the local growers, and some of the wild foods that we can get a hold of here. Unfortunately, we're closed at the moment, as are a lot of other businesses, but we are about to open up a barbecue takeaway, and I'm in the midst of building a big barbecue smoker out of a whiskey barrel, which is pretty exciting. So today we're talking about foraging and a few sort of preserving techniques, and I'm going to show everyone a dish that I've come up with some of the ingredients that I found. I've been a chef for about 11 years, and I picked up foraging 7 years ago, and I've just been learning little things all the way through, picking it up. Yeah, I learned last year. I had an intensive sort of day course with Mark Williams from Galloway Wild Foods, who's based in Galloway, and he is one of the leading foragers in Scotland, and he came over to Glenelg and showed me around and really expanded my knowledge in foraging, having only sort of learnt from books and videos previous, and that was an amazing experience. So today we're going to look at some coastal plants. I went down to Lochalsh yesterday and had a look around the shoreline and found some lovely plants. So before we get on to those plants, there's a few things that we have to think about when we're foraging. One is to always be 100% sure that you know what you're picking is what you're picking. So always check multiple sources. If you're learning a new plant, pick things and bring them back home and research. I don't like to just take my information from one place. I always like to take it from there and then research it further and further. Through the internet's a great commodity for that, and there's lots of books as well. I can show you some of them later, the ones that I use. With regards to etiquette, make sure that you only take what you need, so you're not taking huge amounts of things. Keeping a lot of the plant alive is very important as well, so making sure that you're using a knife or scissors to pick things, and just so that you're not damaging the plant, making sure that you're not trampling over lots of plants, and just being generally aware that you're in the wild, and it's a habitat for lots of creatures and plants and things, and you've got to respect that. With regards to that, don't pick endangered species. So there's a list of endangered species that are, you can find them on the website. You'll find local endangered species, so species that are endangered in Scotland. Make sure you have permission to be picking where you're picking. So in Scotland, we enjoy having the right of way, which means we can pick in most places for personal consumption. If you're picking anything more, you've got to make sure that you have permission from landowner, or you're the landowner, etc. Not uprooting plants as well, so making sure that you're leaving the root of the plant where it is. Again, using knives or scissors to cut the plant up. For your own safety, make sure that you watch out for sort of highly polluted areas, so roadsides, potentially some areas along the coast as well might collect oil and that sort of thing, lots of plastics and things, so make sure you're in an area that's flushed out often. That's very important. So lots of these wild plants will take in the toxins and things of pollution, so very important to make sure that you're in a nice clean area. And finally is using caution when you're trying a new plant or a new wild food. So wild foods tend to be much higher in things like nutrients, vitamins, minerals, but it also means they are much higher in toxins as well. And some of these toxins our bodies can deal with. Other ones, some people might have an adverse reaction to. So just making sure that if you come across a new plant, that you're going nice and gentle and only trying a little bit, and that's after you identified it and you know what it is. So yesterday I was on the shores of Lochalsh in a salt marsh, and Karen took some photos of the salt marsh where I was. So a salt marsh is an area where the sea comes in and washes over grassy lands. I found that the salt marshes here in Glenelg tend to be completely barren of any sort of edible wild greens, mostly because the sheep very much thoroughly enjoy the greens. So here is an image. It was quite high tide yesterday, so you can see it's basically grass and sea together on the shore. And then the next photo is they're just more images of kind of what a salt marsh is. So we're looking specifically at salt marsh and also coastal greens, so things that might grow along the shoreline and the tidal line, and some of the stuff that will grow below as well. So our first plant is scurvy grass. So scurvy grass, some more marsh plants. Yeah. Nice salt marsh, nice and green. So scurvy grass is a funny little plant. It grows along the tidal line and sort of rocky crevices on the shore. This is probably the one you'll come across the most if you are looking for stuff on the shore. So this is some scurvy grass in amongst the rocks. You can see they've got bright green leaves. These leaves all come from one center point. They're quite fat and juicy, these leaves, and they can purple off, which is a sign that the plant's under a little bit of distress. And the flowers are little white flowers, and you can see their seed pods there, which are kind of very bulbous. So with scurvy grass, the heart-shaped leaves are best for picking when they're nice and young. Once the scurvy grass starts to get older, they can kind of misshape and turn more into like a 5-star point, which is helpful for identifying it later on in the season, but they're also not so tasty when they get there. So here is a piece of scurvy grass there, and that one is developing, just it's one of its 5th points just on the side there. The stems purple off down towards the bottom and the base. Sometimes they're white if they're nice and young and fresh. You find these in spring, summer, and yeah, best to eat before the leaves mature to that stage when they become 5-pronged. Flavor-wise, scurvy grass is very spicy or not so spicy. It's a bit of a lottery with scurvy grass. Sometimes you'll have one and it'll be fairly mild. And then other times you have it and it'll blow your head off and it'll be very, very strong. in a sort of wasabi flavour. And it was called scurvy grass because sailors used to pack barrels of this with salt to take on long sea journeys. It's high in vitamin C, so it wards off scurvy. Hopefully that's not too spicy, that one. Okay, so the next one we have, oh yeah, that was a spicy one. The next one we have is sea campion. Now, you might have seen these on the shoreline. They've got lovely, oh, that was a spicy one. They've got lovely white flowers with a sort of purple base that looks very veiny and very bulbous. They look very similar to their relative, which is just bladder campion. Both of these plants are edible, so you're not likely to confuse them with something that isn't edible. Sea campion grows on the coast. It's a nice picture there. And it does infuse itself with a nice bit of the salt, which is great. You can also find it if you're on a road that's heavily gritted, though you wouldn't want to eat that sea campion. You might find some coastal plants have made it that far inland if a road has been heavily gritted. So again, I find this on the salt marsh or on the high tide line, so that sort of band of seaweed that you find right at the top of the shore, that tends to be where it is. I find them easiest to identify when they flower, so their leaves are fairly nondescript. They are edible, but they start flowering from sort of midsummer, and that's the best time to sort of really get to know the plant and to identify them. They have a sort of sweet pea flavour, sometimes a little bit bitter. I only tend to use very small amounts of this, and I find the flavour is sometimes a bit too intense. And again, with foraging, it's important to not eat too much of something, because they can be full of toxins, but sea campion's a great one. Next is one of my favourites, and that's sea plantain. It's a really easy one to spot. Its flowers sort of droop over like this, and its seed pods. They look almost like a sort of blade of wheat or something like that. They grow in big tufts of grass. The leaves are very thick and succulent, and they also tend to have little spines along the side, very few and far between spines. These generally can only be confused with a couple of things, and there's sea thrift, which it can be confused with, which has purple flowers and much finer grass like blades, or sea arrowgrass, which we'll talk about later. The sea plantain is one of my favourites because it's so mild that you can use quite a bit of it. It also doesn't have a high buildup of toxins or anything like some of the other foraging plants. Generally, I would find this sort of year-round. I find it mild and salty, slightly bitter. I tend to cook this and blanch it for a couple of seconds in nice salted water. Also, once the seed and the flower heads start to flower, they'll go a kind of brown colour, brown fluffy colour, and they have lots of little white flowers on them. All the flowers have fallen off this one, but yeah, that's a good way of identifying them. And there is more plantains that grow on land and not in salty areas that are also edible. So there's a broadleaf plantain and a ribwort plantain, and they're pretty tasty too. So next has got to be the best and most sought after foraging green around, and that is samphire or glasswort. Now, samphire is found in salt marshes,
Again, this is kind of quite a rocky space for samphire to be found, but it likes muddy estuaries and salt marshes, and that sort of like silty coastal mud generally is what the samphire enjoys. It's difficult to confuse samphire with other wild plants. It's very distinctive in the way that it looks. It's sort of cactusy. It looks like a succulent, very pointy, and it does have tiny little flowers which are quite difficult to see, but they grow just in between the joins in the samphire. I tend to find samphire wild from sort of midsummer onwards. Anything after July, you'll find will have a really woody stem inside, and they're a little less enjoyable to eat. The flavour of samphire is very salty. It's very mild, and it doesn't have much of another flavour other than just delicious fresh saltiness, which is great. Very high in vitamin C again, like the scurvy grass. And it's got high mineral content, so lots of magnesium, lots of calcium, and a few others. Next is a very underrated sea green. This is sea aster. Here you can see an image of it without it in flower. And these leaves grow on long thin stalks and non-pointed leaves. They grow from a center point, and they have flowers that kind of look like really scruffy purple daisies. Yeah, there we go. I think sea aster is very underrated. It's an excellent plant. Again, like samphire, it's very salty. It's also slightly herbal. So it's almost like raw carrot. It's kind of got that sort of like interesting herbal flavor that raw carrot has. Found this in late summer, similar time to samphire as well. I like it raw or blanched just for seconds. And it's also incredibly high in iron. The leaves are very sort of juicy and thick. Yeah, dark green, juicy, thick, delicious leaves. Again, they're found in sort of salt marsh areas, unless you have geese or sheep that tend to enjoy these things. And then one of the more exciting coastal greens is this, which is sea arrowgrass. It looks like a grass. It grows in a big bunch. Here it's kind of entangled, this photo is kind of entangled amongst some sea drift. You can see it right in the center there. It's that tall, pointy sort of flower head there. That's what I've got here. Now, sea arrowgrass is found on the shoreline. Again, you can kind of see where all that seaweed is kicking up, and behind there, there's a few other things there. It's grass-like, it's light, it's got these big flower stems, and then lots of tiny little flower buds all the way up, which then turn into seed pods. Spring, summer, best time to find them, and the most amazing, surprising thing about the sea arrowgrass is it tastes exactly like coriander. So it's like a salty coriander, which you can find wild around here, which is quite incredible. With sea arrowgrass, there's a little bit of caution is needed in that the very green tips of the actual grass blade can be quite high in cyanide. And cyanide is often found in lots of our foodstuffs, things like elderflower, elderberries, apple core, cherries, apricots. It's just making sure that you're not eating lots. So tend to avoid the sort of dried out tops of the grass and stick to the bottom. The little seeds can be eaten, but again, I just use caution and only use a small amount. And then we have Eolach, which is spelt O-R-A-C-H-E. Lots of people say Orashi, Orachi, Oracha. I don't really know how to say it, but it's Eolach. And this is speared Eolach, and it's a member of the goosefoot family. So things like Good King Henry and Fat Hen are in that group. The speared Eolach is found in the seaweed along the top of the shoreline again, and they have these amazingly pointed leaves that branch out with lots of other points and kind of this sort of very triangular shapes. With Eolachs, you find that in the goosefoot family, if you've got that family, you're safe. So it's just making sure that you can identify this very clearly, and then you know you're good, which is great. There's pointed lobes along the edge of the leaf, so it's quite difficult to see from this far away, but maybe my wonderful wife Jen, you can hold that up closer to the camera. Yeah, so you can see how the edge of the leaf has lots of little points, and then it's a very triangular shape. Leaf. It's got a central stem, and then its flower heads are kind of quite pointy. These ones aren't the flower yet. I found Eolach in summer, again along the coast. Like I was saying, they're a great spinach substitute, and they used to be cultivated. The common Eolach used to be cultivated, and often I found that a lot more people are growing sort of purple Eolach in their gardens these days, which is great. It's a lesser known plant, and it's exciting to have these things on our menus. Great spinach substitute because it's much higher in calcium and iron and vitamin B1 and 2 than spinach, so it's a great addition to your diet. So once you feel you can safely identify it, it's a wonderful addition to the diet. And then my last coastal plant that I find here is English stone crop. So it's like a tiny little succulent that grows in matted carpets along the shoreline, in rock crevices, in sort of very stony beaches and very almost dry areas. Actually, you tend to find the English stone crop. It's got lovely little white flowers. The leaves are very rounded and very puffy and almost pop in your fingers when you touch them. Yeah, they tend to tinge into a red color on the stems with nice bright green leaves. And the flavor is almost tart and kind of lemony, which is a great addition to any dish, really. Lemon's a great flavor. You can use English stone crop raw and in small amounts. Again, like with every wild plant, make sure that you're only using small amounts and make sure everybody agrees with it first. All right, so has anyone got any questions about any of that? It's very brief, and it's you eat scurvy grass seed pods. I've never tried it myself, actually. I'm sure you can, but that would be something to look up online.
So there was just another question there about the second part of the name, stone something.
Stone crop, so C-R-O-P, English stone crop.
And can
sorry.
they be eaten raw? Is that the scurvy grass? I'm not quite sure which one, or all of them, can they be eaten raw?
So the scurvy grass can be eaten raw, the sea campion can be eaten raw, the plantain, it's not very nice raw, it's best to just blanch that quickly. That just has quite a bitter flavour when raw. The samphire can be eaten raw, the sea aster can be eaten raw, sea arrowgrass can be eaten raw, and the Eolach is best eaten sort of wilted and cooked like a spinach. The English stonecrop is one that you can eat raw as well, yeah. And so things like blanching will just sort of subtle down the flavours a little bit. So I do tend to, if I've got scurvy grass, I do tend to, if I'm going to put an amount on to a dish, I will blanch that for 5 seconds in salted water, and then ice bath it. So take it straight out of the boiling water and put it in some water and ice, and that'll just keep it a nice vibrant green colour. And all of these things can be cooked like that, apart from the flowers. So the flowers, they will if you put them in boiling water. So the flowers are edible from the scurvy grass, they're edible from the sea campion, they're edible from the sea plantain, the sea arrowgrass, which is this pointy thin one. It's best not to eat the flowers, but wait until they've turned to seed pods, and then they're good. Sea aster can be eaten, the flowers there. Yeah, basically all of them. So my sort of plan with this is to make a little, just a nice light salad. And this is a sort of salad that I would pair with maybe some grilled lamb, cured fish, something along those lines. And I've got some other stuff from my garden to help along. I've got some radish as well. That'll be great. So, because all of these things are quite small, I'd like to keep my radish nice and big, and that just is going to create a nice big crunch in your mouth. And I am a chef first and foremost, who's got very into foraging. So excuse me if I get too chefy here. So these are lovely radishes from our garden, which are wonderful white grape. Got some radish there. The scurvy grass I'm adding because it's got nice nice peppery sort of spicy flavour, which is going to complement the radish as well, maybe even heighten that flavour, which is great if you're going to have something like grilled lamb. You know, it's kind of almost like having a horseradish dressing with your lamb. Sea plantain, I would, this has been very briefly blanched and then put in cold water, and that just adds some nice texture. You find with plantains that they have this sort of very elasticy strip, kind of, which is a bit chewy inside, and you can kind of just snap the base off and pull them out like that. And that's if you're going to eat them raw. You want to do that. The sea campion, the flowers, like I was saying earlier, the flowers kind of a pea flavour. They're also quite sweet, and I think that the sweetness from the flowers here that we have, including the sea aster, really kind of just helps mellow out the very spicy flavours that we've got going on the plate. The sea aster would go really well with some carrot as well. If you're wanting to kind of like almost heighten the flavour of carrot, adding sea aster there would be an excellent thing to do. Samphire, I love just eating this raw. I think it's fantastic. It's nice and crunchy and juicy and delicious. There. English stonecrop. So the stem of an English stonecrop is quite woody, so you want to remove that. And there. And again, you don't want too much of all this stuff. It's kind of just a taste of all the things that you collected. Your rack. We can add more of that if we want, because it's a nice mellow, low in toxin plant. And then some of the sea arrowgrass. I'm only adding a very small amount of these seeds just because of the high cyanide content. But if you were to just strip it like that, you'll get all a nice big pile of seeds like that. And I have pickled these before and they're pretty delicious. And then it's polytunnel and got some other things just to complement the flavors that we've already got going on here. So we've got some fennel, and I think this is this fantastic herb that goes really well with lots of things. It just adds another depth of flavor. I like that sort of anisey flavor that comes along with, especially when there's something very salty involved. I think it's just delicious. So I've got some of the flowers as well. We've got some watercress, and I'm using watercress just to almost heighten that flavor of the scurvy grass. So scurvy grass is kind of quite similar to watercress as well, and it's a good kind of addition. It goes alongside watercress. And then I've got a couple of nasturtium, and that's like the addition of the spice again. And I maybe wouldn't want to eat this by itself. I would use it as a garnish or a side dish for something else, just because the flavors will be very strong. So there'll be lots of spice and lots of sweetness, and also very salty. So for this dish, you definitely don't need to add any salt, because it's already very salty from the plants, which is great. It's nice to have plants that are already seasoned. That's great. Lessens my job. And then what I would do with this is just dress it with this elderflower vinegar dressing that I've made. And that's just apple cider vinegar with some elderflower that's been left in it for a week, and then strained off and then just kept in a spray bottle. I like to dress my salads with a spray bottle just because it gets a nice even salad dressing that's not too heavy. There we go. And then we've got a nice little salad. That's it to Jenny. There we go. Oh, radishes falling off. There we go. Yeah, and that's a sort of nice little quick intro to coastal foraging. I hope that was mildly informative and might help boost your confidence to go out and see if you can find any of these things yourself.
Yeah, that was great, Verity. Thank you very much. I was seeing some thumbs up as well, so that's good. There was just a couple of questions coming up while you were making the salad, so I didn't want to interrupt you during it. Someone had just wanted clarification about the substitute for spinach. They missed which grass plant.
Yeah. So it's the spear-leaved orache. So it's spelled O-R-A-C-H-E. And it's also, it has started to make a comeback in people's gardens as well. So people are growing common orache or the red orache. And this is the spear-leaved one, which you tend to find on the coast here in Scotland.
And when you were doing your foraging for all of the different things, how wide an area were you having to search for those, or were you finding them all quite close together?
Yeah, they're all pretty close together. So there's things like in Glenelg I find on the shore here, I'll find scurvy grass very easily, but I won't find lots of the other stuff. I have a little spot in Lochalsh where I do find all of these things together within kind of sort of 50 meters or so. So when I collect all the sea greens, the best way to keep them, like I said in the last foraging thing for just generally greens, salad leaves, that sort of thing, is to have a plastic tub, dry paper towel at the bottom, put your salad leaves in, and then a wet paper towel over the top and a lid and in the fridge, and that'll just keep your sea greens nice and fresh. With samphire, it's actually best to wash, rather than using fresh water to wash it, it's better to use the seawater, and the seawater kind of coats it and kind of keeps it fresher for a bit longer.
Okay, great. Now, there was a couple of, someone was asking if that was samphire you had there. Yeah. Now,
so,
oh yeah, thank you, that'd be good. I will apologise now if anyone's hearing a bit of a noise. My husband's building a shed, so I don't know if you can hear the hammering, hopefully not. Yeah, can you just do a quick wee bit about seaweeds? Someone was asking that didn't manage to make the last one. I know it's a huge area for foraging, but maybe just a quick summary.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so seaweeds in the west coast are great. So seaweeds, most of the tastiest seaweeds like areas that are kind of quite harshly battered by wind and storms. So that's great for us here. The seaweeds on the west coast of Scotland, as far as I'm aware, there are no poisonous ones that grow in the tidal line, so between high tide and the low tide. I'm not sure if there are poisonous ones that grow further out. When you're picking seaweeds, always go on a low tide, so you're getting the freshest, cleanest seaweed. So you don't want to pick anything that's kind of mid-tide or high up on the shore. So there's lots of seaweeds that are edible. Some of the best are peppered dulse, carrageen, there's velvet shank, which is great, and yeah, there's all kinds of seaweeds out there. Laver, carrageen, I think I said that, but there's one called mermaid's pubes, which is an unfortunate name. I don't think that's its actual name, can't remember what it's called, but that's its nickname, and that's an interesting seaweed. Yeah, there's lots of things you can do with seaweeds. One of the best books I have for seaweeds is this one, which is the Seaweed and Eat It book, and it's got lots of information you can find around Britain, which is good. Unfortunately, there's not that many written stuff about Scotland specifically. It's a slightly different landscape to England. You'll find a lot of things you find on in foraging books, and online will be things that you might not find in Scotland actually. Yeah. Seaweeds, when I pick them, I tend to dehydrate them. Last foraging webinar I did, what we did with the peppered dulse was chop it up and mix it into softened butter, which you can just roll up and then store in the freezer for a long time. And you can use it almost like a salted butter to finish off fish or lamb or that sort of thing. I hope that answers the seaweed question.
I need to unmute myself. Someone was also asking if you could just go over the elderflower dressing recipe again, please.
Oh yeah, okay. So for me, I tend to not complicate dressings, and I like to not mix lots of things together and make one thing, and keep everything as separate as possible. So with my salad dressings, I will stick to just a vinegar usually, and then if I've got an oil, I'll use that separately on the salad as well. And I like that that's interesting when you're eating it and you have a really sharp moment and then a sort of mellower oil moment. So for the elderflower vinegar, I just took elderflower flowers. You can use red elderflower as well. Use elderflower flowers, and I put them into just some high quality apple cider vinegar, which I tend to use as a base for most of my vinegars, and left that for a week, and then strained out the elderflower, and it sort of adds a little bit of elderflower to vinegar. It's really nice, and sometimes I'll drink it as a almost like a cordial with honey and vinegar. Yeah.
And you would, with the vinegar, you would just add honey to it and then.
And yeah, a bit of hot water and create like a little paste, and then maybe soda water or something. It's almost like a shrub, which is a method of kind of extracting delicious flavors using vinegar, salt and sugar from things.
And would that be the same as a normal like elderflower cordial, or presumably would be sugar based, are they?
Yeah, so a normal cordial would be water and sugar, and then the elderflower added to that, potentially a bit of citric acid or lemon juice, and that would create a sort of rounded flavor. So cordial tends to be a lot sweeter than a shrub or a vinegar based drink. It's very good for your health, vinegar.
Yeah, and what would be the ratio for elderflowers to the apple cider vinegar, and say if you were jam jar size?
If you were jam jar size, I make sure I remove all the stalks and probably put in as much elderflower as I could. Yeah, I don't think when you're making a vinegar, the ratios aren't, so you're just infusing that into the vinegar, so the ratios aren't so important as like a recipe for a cordial or fermentation and that sort of thing.
That's great, thank you very much. Now, there was a bit of a discussion in the chat while you were going over some of the items. Someone was asking about the tall wild plant that looks like a conifer tree shape. Is it the same as the marsh plant? So the chat worked out that we think it's mare's tail.
Oh yes.
That you would get in a garden. Is that edible? Is it related to any of the sea?
I'm not actually entirely sure. From what I've heard, it is edible, but I haven't ever tried it myself, and I haven't really looked into it. Yeah, I don't think it's related to any of the coastal plants, as far as I'm aware, but it might be.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And just sort of also in the chat as well, someone had suggested that it makes a good hair rinse, because it's rich in silica. So. Yeah, it's interesting how these things can be used for multiple multiple things. Yeah, and then I think the last question we have was recommending any sea plant foraging books. I can see you've got a stack of books. I don't know if you want to maybe.
There's the Seaweed and Eat It. That's got some of the coastal greens in it. There's also there's a River Cottage handbook, which is edible seashore. Again, this is tailored towards sort of the English coastal areas, so there's some things that you won't find in there. But for me, I tend to just Google like what coastal greens you'll find in Scotland. That's a great way, and then look it up further in this, which is the Forager's Handbook, which is more of a dictionary as opposed to an identification thing. Like the pictures are all in black and white, and it's very it's quite scientific and it's very botanical, and can be a little bit overwhelming, this one, but it's a good it's a good source if you find something specific. You can search it in the back and then double check everything, which is why I like this one. But I don't have any other specific books that I have. There's my foraging mentor, Mark, his website's really good, which is Galway Wild Food, and he's got all kinds of things as well.
Was that Galloway Wild Food?
Yeah, Galloway Wild Foods. Yeah.
Okay, and oh yeah, someone's just saying for the mare's tail, air dry it for tea. Don't drink it too often, as the hair is toxic with rosemary. I'm not sure if it's meant to say rosemary. It might be an autocorrect. But they might get back to us on that one.
Yeah.
What about apps? There's plant identification apps. Can you
Yeah.
use them for foraging as well?
Yeah, so the plant identification apps are great things for starting to get into foraging and things like that, and I certainly would not rely on one. They may be good to kind of go around and check things and sort of explore with, but I certainly wouldn't use it as a definitive answer to a question I had on plants. There's no way a computer can process this information like human beings can.
Yeah, there's someone's agreeing. Yeah, don't trust the apps. Now, someone quite sensible, good suggestion, William. Do you have to be wary of algal blooms as you would if you were going for shellfish?
Great question. So I think I actually was looking this up the other day. With coastal plants, like the greens, I don't think so. Seaweeds, potentially there's an element of caution involved, and I probably would be cautious if there's an algae bloom out in my area at the moment. I don't really know how people find this information. Maybe there's a website or something that tells you.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is a website for it. It's something I can look up, because I seem to get notifications on my Facebook. I'm not sure if I don't get notifications, but I see them popping up in my Facebook feed, so it must be a page that I follow, but I can't say I remember the site that's actually posting it, but I can have a look for that as well, see where it's coming from.
It's certainly something that is, I think, is becoming more frequent with water temperatures rising and stuff like that, so maybe it's something to be more aware of.
In fact, I'm just thinking it might even be the Highland Council that give notification because of the regulations, SEPA issues, notices someone's saying, and I'm sure that I've seen them by the Highland Council as well, because they obviously have their like standards department and that sort of thing, environmental health, so that's probably a good place to check as well as SEPA.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's slightly different in that a lot of these like shellfish and stuff, they're constantly flushing inside their bodies with the water and the algae, and with plants it's more filtered through a root system, so I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely something to look up, and I did try the other day but didn't get very far. Yeah,
there's been a few warnings certainly around Skye for the algal blooms, so it's very good question to ask, and quite an interesting one.
So it's always worth using caution, always. So
yeah, so I think that's all the questions. I don't know if anyone has any more questions that they just want to pop up quickly. We're nearly at 5 o'clock, so we've done quite well on that one.
That's great.
I think that might be it.
So yeah.
Oh, do you have a go-to foraging Bible in colour that you use?
Good question. My favourite is the Richard Maybe's Food for Free. Well loved, as you can see, which is very good. And I don't find it the easiest of identification tools, But I love the big photos that are in here, and they can certainly point you kind of very close to where you want to, what you're looking at, or where you are, and things like habitat and stuff. So yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Verity and Jenny for the work that you've done on this again. It's been brilliant, and we will yeah, keep you posted about the other events. There's lots of things. Have a look at our website. Everyone's saying thank you. It's lovely to see you.
I'm going to say a big thank you to Karen as well for organising all this.
I definitely have the easy part of this, I think. So I'll just we'll say goodnight.